Hi, I'm Jeff Morgenthaler, and I'm here with.
I'm Terry Combs, and we're with Equipment Zone.
Hey, it's great to be with you guys here with the last installment of our Easy DTG Index webinar series, number 5. Hey, Terry, why don't we take a minute to review the first 4 that we went over?
Absolutely. Number one, Jeff, was graphics. And, DTG printers produce exactly what you send to them. I was talking to someone who bought a machine from another manufacturer, and he said to me, well, this company said that I can take a 72 DPI file and the machine will fix it. I'm here to tell you, America and the rest of the world, that's not true. what you need, what you need is a 300 DPI file saved at full size, and you're going to have a perfect print. Number 2 was substrates, and I think we all know that 100% ring spun cotton is our best friend. But hey, can we print other cotton items? Absolutely. You might have to do a little bit of adjusting, little trickery to make them work best. And then, of course, there is dye migration that we need to deal with. Just like screen printers. Screen printers had to come up with ink that would cure at a lower temperature. We don't have that option with DTG. We're curing in that 338, 340 or 40 degrees temperature. So anytime we're printing with a polyester, the dye in the polyester wants to float into our ink, and so there's some things that we have to do to print on blends. 100% polyester. Can you make it work? You can. Should you? Probably not. It's kind of a big process to make it work. Probably not very profitable. But as I said at the start, 100% ring spun cotton is your best friend, and that's the absolute best substrate to print on to get that perfect print. So Jeff, how about the next 2?
Yeah, so number 3 on our index was pre-treat, and we get asked about this all the time, Terry. Pre-treat is so critical, as are all of these, but pre-treat seems to be, there's a lot of confusion out there in the marketplace about what pre-treat to use, how to properly pre-treat. There's several different products out there. What machine should we use? And we've done a lot of webinars on pre-treat, specifically all those different points that I just mentioned. And so I would encourage anybody who's struggling with pre-treat to go back through our webinar series and just review those. And if you have questions after you do that, you can always call into our support team and talk about it. And then the 4th thing that we talked about in our webinar series, the last webinar we did, was about the environment. And having a good, clean environment, having the proper humidity levels, the proper temperature levels, all those things, taking care of your printer, shaking the ink cartridges, cleaning your capping station, doing a nozzle check every day. Those are all things that we covered in that last webinar. So again, if those are things that you have questions about, you should go back and review that webinar. So Terry, let's go ahead and jump into what's next here in our number 5. And this is about the final thing about curing our shirts, and what are our different options and how we can properly make sure that they're cured.
Sure. And I wanted to mention real quick, Jeff, that if people do have technical questions, we do have Roy, our senior technician, monitoring the questions. And so he'll be trying to answer questions as we go along. And so feel free to jump in and ask questions as we go. Jeff, and this index, to re-explain, I'm guessing that most everyone who is here today probably saw most, if not all, of the previous ones. So we start at the low end of 2 points and up to 10 points. And if you're do all these things in the index and you're in that 40 to 50 range of points granted to you for using the right substrate, having the proper environment, all those types of things, then you're going to get that perfect print, that trade show shirt. Why don't my shirts look like the trade show shirts, right? So on the low end, someone curing at a too low temperature. This is a 2-pointer. People will say, well, I'm using a conveyor dryer, so can I just run it through the dryer 4 or 5 times? Not really. You might get it the the ink the water to evaporate, but for good washability, you have to have a proper curing temperature. And that, again, just like and I refer to screen printing again. If that ink film doesn't get to 320 degrees, you're not going to get good washability. Same with direct to garment printing. You need to be up in that 340-degree range. But if you do have that that proper temperature, you're going to get great washability. So what's the test for great washability in our industry in garment decorating? Then 50 plus washings is considered a permanent print. So if your print is degrading as you wash it a few times, then one of the issues might be not getting a proper cure. You're at a too low a temperature. So
Yeah,
how
perfect
yeah,
and well said, Terry. I just wanted to reiterate something you said. I really liked how you pointed out you might be able to dry it, get the water out of it, but there's a difference between drying and curing, and that's why we like to use the
exactly.
word curing. This ink has to be cured to be on there permanently.
Right. And so, there are a variety of different elements that might impact your washability, but not getting to the proper curing temperature is definitely one of those things that can impact how well this garment washes. And Jeff, I've got garments that I've probably washed 100 times that are DTG printed, and the garment starts falling apart before the print does. That's the true test. And by the way, wash testing, there's no better way to test your curing method and all the other elements on this list than to do a wash test. So make sure you print some garments and put them right there in your laundry room. And every time you do a load of laundry, wash those as well, and mark them with a permanent marker, something, how many times you've washed that garment. And there's no better test than the wash test.
I can tell you this, Terry, if somebody were to call in and say to our support department, hey, my graphics are washing off the shirt, they're coming apart in the wash, I guarantee you that's going to be the first thing that they talk to you about. Tell me about your heat press. And
Yeah,
if you were doing good and then all of a sudden they started coming out, it could be that there's something wrong with your heat press.
right.
So
But yeah,
there are
it's
ways
just
to test that.
sure. And that's exactly correct too, that when you do call in, they're going to ask you about different steps in the process that you're doing. And so you're going to have to know, how you pre-treat it and all the different steps in the process, but they'll have you walk through, and then they'll stop you at some point and say, okay, now let's talk about your curing temperature or whatever.
Exactly. All right, let's go on to the next point. And this, we're giving 4 points, and this is because it works. Hover them, then cure them. So a lot of people will have been told, and not wrongly so, that you can hover it to dry it first and then heat press it. The reason we kind of put this a little bit lower on our list is because even though you can do that and it kind of works, it's not necessary. You can achieve the same thing by drying it by just laying it on a table. When you're in a production format, when you have several shirts to do, you don't want to tie up your heat press in hover mode when you need that to be drying and curing your shirts. Okay, so when you're doing, because you have to use it for your pre-treat, and then you need it also after you print. So if you want that print to dry a little bit before you heat press it, just lay it on a table. Don't tie it up with putting your heat press in hover mode over it. All you're doing is helping it dry a little faster. See,
Yeah,
when you go ahead.
I was just going to say what a lot of people don't realize, Jeff, and you were probably getting ready to say this yourself, but heat presses are contact heat sources, which means they don't really radiate heat unless they are touching the garment. So just like you said, you get the exact same effect from just taking that shirt and sitting it on a table. And I was talking to a customer just yesterday about he had talked to a heat press company and said, "Oh, if you're doing Epson DTG, you'll need the hover mode." And I was explaining to him, well, the hover mode doesn't really do anything. You can just sit it on the table. And of course, he came back and said, well, why would I want to buy it with a hover mode? And I said, you know what? It comes that way. So, but
Yeah.
we don't recommend that you use it.
And by the way, that's not unique to Epson. That's true for all direct-to-garment printing.
Correct.
So if somebody says to me, hey, if you got an Epson, then you have to hover press it, that means that they were talking to a competitor and they were trying to use that as a negativity. That would be true for all direct-to-garment printing. So don't tie up your heat press with the hover mode when you can just lay those shirts out and let them dry a little bit before you heat press.
Right. Well, the next step in the process was with 6 points, using a professional heat gun to cure the garments. And what's a professional heat gun? It's at Ace Hardware, and it's that looks like a hair dryer but much hotter and used to remove wallpaper, that sort of thing. They're $20. Can you cure a shirt using a heat gun? You could. Are you going to get consistent washability? Probably not. If you're on such a tight budget that that you have to use a heat gun, yeah, it will work. But do we use a heat gun? We do. When we are curing hats, when we're curing high top sneakers or odd shaped items, that we do use a heat gun to cure them, because first of all, it's very difficult to get those items into a heat press. Yeah, you can buy a hat press that, Jeff, we were just talking about before we went on the air. You can buy a good hat heat press to do that. But how often is a hat, or how often are shoes going to be laundered? Not very often, if ever. And the reason that we use a heat press to cure garments is because we want to get that washability, because the assumption is if it's your favorite shirt, you're going to wash it 50 times during a year. Every Wednesday you wear that favorite t-shirt, you're going to wash it, that weekend. But since we don't launder sneakers, we don't launder hats very often, it's perfectly fine to use a heat gun to cure those. And here's a pro tip: if you do want to wash your hats, just put them on the top rack of your dishwasher when you're washing your dishes, and that's a perfect way. We wear a lot of hats here in Arizona, Jeff.
Yeah.
I'm more than you probably.
We do wear a lot of hats, and when you're talking about direct-to-garment hats, I think that a lot of these are going to be mostly used in a promotional product sense, or maybe like a special event. And you're right. I don't know that I would be washing this too often. If I had it, I'd probably wear it for a year or so. And if it started looking janky, I might be looking for a new hat. But
with my roughly 40 hats in my closet, I can afford to throw one away and get another one.
That's right.
But yeah,
that's right.
But for curing garments, it's not a very good way to do it. Will it work? Yeah, for the most part, but time consuming, and you're always going to have that doubt that did I get that entire surface of that print cured? So we want to steer away from that. But again, use it for those odd shaped items, especially sneakers. A very popular platen that we sell, and that's the perfect way to cure those. And Jeff, at trade shows, that's when we're doing hats or sneakers, things like that, you'll see we'll have that heat gun right there next to the printer.
Yeah, I'll just put in a quick shameless plug here for sneakers. I've talked to people who sell these for over a couple $100 a pair. You can get these for about $25, the blanks.
Right.
There's a little bit of prep work, and that's why you charge more for them. But if you have the right market, it's a great option. So
well, and let me add to that, Jeff. Here's a little pro tip for you. Well, who would I sell sneakers to? Every community has a dance. Somewhere where somebody can go and join the dance team or take dance lessons, and everywhere from 2-year-olds to 20-year-olds are in there, and they all do hip hop. And do you think that the dance studio would be interested in tennis shoes that had the dance studio's logo on them? Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. And do they care how much they cost? Absolutely not. That just gets billed to the parents, and
absolutely.
they would pay
And we pay it.
$125 a pair all day long.
I have 4 daughters, Terry. I know how it works. All right, let's move on to the next one into our 8-point category. And this is a craft heat press. So let me just start by saying this comes up a lot when I talk to somebody who's on a budget and they already have a heat press. And here's an example of one. There are others that you can find out there in the market online where you would only buy it online. You probably would never even talk to a sales rep about it. And a lot of these are made very cheaply to get that price down. And when they're made cheaply, let me just say, when it comes to a heat press, you get what you pay for. You can expect that a $300 heat press is going to last you about 6 months. Wouldn't you agree, Terry?
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. Jeff, I was teaching a screen printing class 2 weeks ago in Chicago, and I got on my soapbox talking about heat presses, and a gentleman in the class raised his hand and he said, I just bought one from Amazon for $300, but I didn't take
Yep.
it out of the box yet. I guess I should just return it. And I said, yes, you absolutely should return it.
Save your $300 if you can. But you know what, Terry? If this is what you need to do to get in the game, then do it. Okay, get in the game, save up your money from your production, and then buy a more professional heat press. A good heat press should cost you around $1,500,
Right.
$1,500 and up. So we sell the GeoNite brand, and we love GeoNite because they have a lifetime warranty on the heating elements, and they have excellent customer service. If you ever had an issue, they just take care of you right away.
Right.
And they're very well priced. They have the auto release, so we recommend the clamshell when it comes to direct to garment. Hotronix is another great brand. Both of these are U.S. made, U.S. owned family companies, and just both great to work with, great warranties. So you're going to pay a little extra for that, but these are the type of heat presses you're going to have for the length of your business. You're going to have these. You're not going to throw them away. You're going to be adding to it as your business grows.
Well, Jeff, and that's the thing. And another good one, a good American made hit press is Hicks, Hix,
Yep.
HicksCorp, I believe.com. Made right there in Pittsburgh, Kansas, no H at the end. And and just like you said, Jeff, it's an investment because yes, you're going to pay $1,000 more for it than you did for that craft heat press, but 20 years from now, that heat press is still going to be in your shop. I believe I'm correct in saying that every American-made heat press manufacturer guarantees the heating element on their heat presses for life. So,
Yeah,
I mean,
and
you
Terry,
can't beat that.
when it comes to that guarantee, what they're talking about is that you're going to have even temperature across that whole heating element. What you get when you buy those cheaper craft presses or those $300 presses is they don't have the same coil heating element
Right.
inside. And so you might have one temperature in this corner and a completely different temperature in the other corner or in the middle. And like I said earlier in the webinar, there's ways to test for that. There are laser guns that you can point at it. There's also little heating strips that you can put down on your heat press and test and make sure. But having the right temperature, we went back, if you go back to the beginning when we talked about your temperature is too low, if you have a part of your heat press where that temperature is too low while the other parts are correct, and that sure goes to watch, you might have a part of that washes out. So you have to be careful.
Right. And Jeff, I also hear from people that the temperature readout on those presses is not always correct either. So if that's all you can afford, that's all you can have to use right now, do lots and lots of testing to make sure that you're getting the right cure. And Jeff, you had also mentioned using a clamshell heat press. The reason that we say that is a clamshell heat press can have auto release, like you mentioned, and anybody who's ever used a heat press without auto release thinks they've gone to t-shirt heaven when they have one with auto release. Because here's the rule of heat presses: the further away you get from that heat press, the higher the likelihood of that buzzer going off that says it's done. So
Absolutely.
that auto
Terry,
release. Go ahead.
it's funny you bring that up. I remember being at trade shows for years before the auto releases came out, and we would show somebody a sample and pull that heat press down, and then go back to talking to the client, writing up a quote, talking to somebody else, and then it's so loud in those shows you don't hear that thing beeping. Next thing you know, there's smoke coming off of it. So the auto release is, you're right, when those came out, I felt like I had died and gone to heaven.
And at those trade shows, then a technician goes over and pops that heat press up and just shakes their head and goes, salesman.
Yep. They do that a lot, it seems like.
Yeah, they do. Anyway, okay. Well, so Jeff, 10 points, the best scenario for curing the products. And that this is either a professional, high quality heat press or a conveyor dryer. I was talking to a customer just a couple of days ago. It was this week, who said to me, well, the difference in a shirt cured with a heat press and one cured on a conveyor dryer is like night and day. And I said, well, that's not really true. And then I realized that another company was trying to sell him a $20,000 dryer to go with his printer. So therefore saying, well, the difference is just too much. Conveyor dryer is so much better. If you use either a conveyor dryer or a heat press properly, either method's going to give you a proper cure. And for this particular customer, we actually printed his graphic and cured one on the conveyor dryer and one on the heat press, and they look virtually the same. But here's the real scenario. If you're running one direct-to-garment printer, really the most convenient thing for you to do is to use a heat press. Once you get into multiple machines, and I know a customer, once they got their fifth direct-to-garment printer, their fifth F2100, that's when they invested in a conveyor dryer. Also, if you're going to be using the F3070 printer, which is going to print, roughly 50 garments an hour, a conveyor dryer is a lot more practical. But we still want you to have a heat press. And the reason being is if, so for instance, people will say, well, if I pre-treat, can I just put it on my conveyor dryer belt? You can, but you still want to hit it with that heat press for 5 or 10 seconds before you print to lay the fibers of the shirt down. And why do we want to do that? The presentation to the customer. You lay those fibers down. DTG printers print with such fine detail. If you lay those shirt fibers down, you can see that detail better. It makes a better presentation to the customer. So, Jeff, and I don't know if we talked about this. I know we mentioned the temperature, 338 degrees. If I'm curing a white shirt, I'm going to do it with an Epson printer. I'm going to do it for 45 seconds. If I'm curing a color shirt, I'm going to cure it for 90 seconds. The rule of thumb with Epson is, for every layer of ink, I want to have 45 seconds of cure time. And so obviously with a white shirt, I'm going to have CMYK only, so 45 seconds. A color shirt, I'm going to have my white underbase and my color on top. So I'm going to go 90 seconds. But here's the key. And a lot of folks don't understand this. The absolute lightest pressure possible is what we need to cure these shirts. People will call us up, Jeff, and say, well, my print looked great, but when I put it on the heat press, it's all muted and all dull. Well, that's because they've used too much pressure. All we want to do is just kiss that shirt. We just want to just touch it. One of the methods you can do to determine that on your heat press is to lay a shirt on the press, put a sheet of silicone parchment paper on top, clamp it down, loosen up that pressure control until that paper slides out, and then give it a quarter turn to tighten it. And that's the perfect way to get that proper pressure, just touching. And as I mentioned before, Jeff, this is a contact heat source. As soon as it comes in contact, then it's getting us up, it's getting that ink film up to 338, 340 degrees. As for your conveyor dryer, we have people ask us all the time, well, I've got a screen printing dryer. Can I use that? Well, the answer is yes or no. if you have good airflow, that's going to be helpful. You don't have to have airflow though. The dryers that we sell are the Vastex dryers that are made specifically for direct-to-garment printing, and how they construct those is with a burst of heat on the front end to start the evaporation and to start the curing process. So as it goes down the belt, it will completely cure. But your dryer that you use for screen printing will likely work. You're just gonna have to do a lot of testing, and you may have to slow that dryer way down to get to the proper cure temperature. When you see online someone saying, well, it must be in the dryer for 2 minutes, it must be in the dryer for 1 minute, it must be in the dryer for 3 minutes, that's meaningless, because here in Arizona, where we have an average of 10% humidity, there's no moisture in that shirt. So it's going to cure more quickly. If we're with our friend Dane Clement down in New Orleans at Great Dane Graphics, where he has probably 90% humidity every day, then he's going to have to slow his dryer down, or maybe run the shirt down the dryer before you print it, because any moisture that's in that garment will keep that ink film from getting above 212 degrees until all that moisture evaporates. So, running it down the belt to start that process is a good way to deal with it, but you have to test to get, and once you get the right temperature, now you're gonna also test when you use different substrates. When I go from a t-shirt to a sweatshirt, it's gonna take longer for that material to get up to temperature. It's not just the ink, it's where the ink touches the garment. So if that garment is at 212 because it's still evaporating water, the ink on top is going to cure, but it's not going to cure where it's embedded into the fabric. So, I just can't emphasize this enough. Test when you are starting out with either a heat press or with a conveyor dryer. But once you nail down those times, you're going to be good to go. It's not as exacting as it is with, say, screen printing, where there are a lot more variables of ink thicknesses and different types of inks and that sort of thing. So,
Terry,
number
it
10,
sounds
Jeff,
like,
go ahead.
It sounds like you could do this exact webinar for making me a pizza.
I could,
getting that dough just the right temperature, and that sauce and that cheese, and where it touches.
And you want it to be done in the middle, but you also want that cheese to be a little crispy on top.
Well, we'll have to test that later. Hey, and I wanted to also add about conveyor dryers, Terry, is that, you really dove into nailing how the temperature and the time has to work, and that's all critical. So I get people who, just like you, they ask me all the time, will my dryer work? And I tell them to contact their manufacturer, wherever they got it from. They need to call them and go over that with them, because they need to know exactly how that's going to work, and then do what Terry said, test. But for me, a big part of this is the production side of things. So, you brought up, at what point do you add a dryer? Is it after 1 or 2 or 5 printers? It really depends on how many shirts you're printing a day. I have a lot of people, by the time they get their second printer, they're looking at getting a dryer. And as you saw in one of our slides, there's a lot of options out there. We rep the Vastex brand, and they have several different sizes and speeds with different types of heaters. And what's great about Vastex is that you can expand those. So let's say you started somewhere in the middle because you have 2 direct-to-garment printers, right? So you're going to get, you don't need the biggest and the fastest, but you get something that's sort of in the middle. Then you decide a little bit later on to add a 3rd, 4th printer, or maybe you jump up to the 3070, then you can expand, or you can get even another conveyor dryer. But it's all about making sure that you have those temperatures and that time set in right, and then also balance that with your production.
Jeff, I talk to people, not only do I do instruction in direct-to-garment, but I also teach screen printing classes, as I mentioned. And when I talk about conveyor dryers, I always say, buy for the future. If you can afford to buy a dryer that will service 2 printers as opposed to 1, or 3 printers as opposed to 1, then make that investment, because before you know it, you're going to be buying second machines. We have customers who bought one F2100 and 2 months later come back and say, hey, I need two more because
Yep.
my business has just taken off. So try to buy for the future if you can afford it.
Yeah. Well, that kind of brings us to the end of the webinar. Like we said before, we didn't dive too much into the technicality of curing, but more talked about the overall different aspects of it. And if you have real technical questions, you can always reach out to our support department. Roy's been answering questions this whole time. He's great to communicate with. And
we're getting support staff today.
That's right.
And Royce, you got to ask. I mean, our technicians, Jeff, if they are not doing a training, if they're not on the phone with you, they're printing, and lots of companies send us their new products to test. And we've got this new product that's already pre-treated. Will you do some test prints for us? And they send those to us because they know our technicians are professionals. They know that our technicians are almost exclusively DTG, and I think you have an example of what one of our technicians has done.
I just wanted to, I think this is a great way to wrap things up, is talk about is to tell this story right here. So I don't know how well the camera is going to show this, but this is a great looking, vibrant print on this shirt. This graphic came from a client who was really struggling to print it. And, if we go back to the first aspect of our index, graphics, he had a good graphic, so he couldn't understand why it wasn't printing well. So then Roy dove into the substrate and found that, well, you know what, let's try a different shirt. And now let's talk about pre-treat. And he went through all these different things with him all the way through the curing process. And they got a great looking print, same graphic. So we know that this index works. We've proven it over and over and over again. We've put a lot of thought and effort into this so that you have a recipe for success.
Hey, Jeff, hold that shirt up again. With your 5 kids, you would be the coolest dad ever, dropping your kids off at school in that might be the coolest van of all time.
And not only that, I wouldn't have to worry about traffic because I would just go right over it. Yeah, this is my dream car right here.
I love it. Well, if anybody has further questions, you can always reach out to us. Certainly feel free to reach out to our technicians. The number is 201-797-1504, 201-797-1504 for support. And guess what? If you bought your F2000 or F2100 from somebody else, we'll still support you. Give us a call, and we're happy to give you some help.
I'd also like to recommend that a lot of people join the Facebook group. If you're not already a member of it, sign up to the F2100 DTG user group or the F3070 user group. I'll tell you what, Terry, we get a lot of great interaction with clients there. Clients interacting with clients, helping each other out, talking about things that they see out in the production world that sometimes we don't see. I know Roy and Jay are on there a lot. I try to get on there when I can, but
well, and the great thing too is Jay monitors that very carefully to make sure that there's no negativity. Nobody is complaining about somebody else, this and that. It's all just very positive, helping each other out. And you're correct. I think, and Jay might be able to help us out, but we have over 1,000 members in that group, and over 800 of them are active on it regularly. So
that was really great news that we heard this week. So that's a great forum, a great business tool for you to interact with other people around the country using the same tools you are.
And also, please join our YouTube channel, Equipment Zone YouTube channel. Again, we have videos that have nearly 1 million views, but and Jeff, I know we're hearing this more and more when someone will call us up and say, hey, I saw you guys on YouTube, and I just have this question about dryers. I have this question about ink. So So get over there. We do a lot of education. And I think that most of the people listening right now are already aware of that. But we believe strongly in education, and we try to get new videos up there all the time. And our technicians are always doing training videos just on the little things that we need to that you might not necessarily want to call and ask, but here's a little short video on how to do this process.
Yeah, and there's our contact information for Equipment Zone, for Terry, for me, for Amy. And I'd just like to make a special shout out to Jay Bassell, our marketing director, who has done a great job putting this series together, and to Harry Oster, the owner of our company, who has let us run with it. So thank you guys. We appreciate it.
All right. Well, Jeff, I guess that will be it for us today. Thanks for tuning in to all 5 of the index of great DTG printing. And if you follow these steps, you're going to have those same shirts that you see at the trade shows.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.